Okay, cool. Hi everyone, Eva here from Blooming Meats Kitchen with Dr. Sasha Houseman.
Hi everybody.
So first of all, we have been doing these Facebook Lives every Monday. And my intention is to bring the best experts from the Boulder and Denver community to answer some questions about paleo, about nutrition, about healing disease, and autoimmunity, which is a very, very interesting topic. So today, that's what we're talking about, autoimmunity.
Yes, we are.
So that's a start. So Sasha, I really want to find out a little bit about your story. What is your story? How did you get to paleo for healing autoimmunity? How did you begin with this?
Absolutely. So I've always struggled with health issues my entire life. I had always had different health concerns. I had anxiety. I had struggled with OCD. I had different things going on, and I didn't really understand what was happening with myself. And growing up, I just didn't have the answers. Nutrition was never something that was really addressed with me. And so I wanted to basically take my weakness and make it my strength through my education. And so I ended up doing my undergraduate degree in psychology and my master's and my doctorate degree in clinical nutrition so that I could help people with some of these mental conditions help manage their disease in the most natural way possible, because I think that's the best way to do it if you're actually healing the root cause of the condition versus just covering up the symptoms. And that's the way I really like to practice. And so I personally have PCOS, and so because of that, my estrogen levels are really high, and because of that, I always had autoimmunity in my gut. Never really knew exactly what was going on until I finally did some testing on myself and got that education that I needed to be able to help myself and therefore help others.
Yeah, and you mentioned you have Crohn's too, right?
Crohn's or generalized autoimmunity of my gut. I'm not exactly sure exactly what the diagnosis is because I've never gone to a primary care practitioner. I've just always healed myself. But yes, generalized autoimmunity of some sort going on.
That's really cool. You know, I'm curious because some people just don't know what autoimmune is and how it works.
Yeah.
Would you mind giving me a little bit of background on how autoimmune happens?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, autoimmune disease is where your body normally is naturally supposed to fight off invaders. And what can happen with autoimmune disease is that that body might become accidentally a little bit confused and start to attack normal, healthy cells. And so autoimmunity in general happens the same way. Where it happens in the body is where we get different names of different autoimmune diseases. So, for example, autoimmunity of the thyroid could be Hashimoto's or Graves', versus autoimmunity in the gut could be something like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. So the manner in which it attacks the body is the same way, but where it attacks in the body is what gives it the different names for the different conditions.
Can I ask some super dumb questions?
Yes.
So it's Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, is that autoimmunity too?
It can be.
Okay.
It can. Well, so there's a lot of different root causes of conditions, and so that's what we can talk about a little bit next is what are the root causes of autoimmunity? So we might have different things that come into play, and a lot of these conditions actually interplay with one another. And
sorry,
my
phone rang. Here we go.
So figuring out what the root cause of your autoimmunity is super important.
Yeah.
So, for example, some things that we know may trigger autoimmune conditions are things like exposure to environmental toxins like mold, heavy metals, things of that nature. Also combined with some of our genetics where we may have a little bit of a predisposition to certain conditions, we may have some of that autoimmunity pop up. So you may have come into contact with mold or heavy metals, or you may have, like me, some hormone imbalances that may be triggering some of your autoimmunity. And with that, you may just be genetically a little bit more susceptible to having some of that autoimmunity happen in different places in the body. And because of that, that's where some of those may come up.
So you have certain genes.
Yes.
And they can get expressed by your environmental.
Yes.
So like mold and other circumstances and
exactly.
Okay.
So a lot of people think that our genes are really set in stone and that whether we have a gene means that it's happening. If we have this gene for this, we're going to get this disease. And that's not necessarily the case. some genes may give us a little bit more of a predisposition to a certain condition versus another, but it's our impact with the environment, it's our impact with our stress, our mental health, our physical health, all these things come into play to affect whether or not those genes are turned on or off. So really, I mean, that's the whole field of epigenetics and how much that affects our health and our genome and our health consequences in the long run because of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about one root cause in specific. There's a lot of talk about leaky gut.
Yes.
Yeah. Would you mind maybe go over it and explaining about how it works and how nutrition can affect it?
Absolutely. So basically what happens is in your intestinal lining, your cells are supposed to be tight against one another. Okay. And what can happen is with leaky gut, sometimes those junctions between the cells can loosen a little bit.
And so you basically have holes in your gut.
Microscopic, yes. Great. So what can happen, and one of the big proponents of that is zonulin. And gluten is actually what can increase zonulin levels in the system. And so by gluten increasing that zonulin, we have a higher chance of that leaky gut happening, of those cell junctions becoming loosened. And that's where we can get some of that condition happening.
Okay, so the way I think about it, and correct me if I'm wrong, everything that's in the gut is not in the body. It's basically, the gut is to filter keep the bad stuff inside the gut and let the good stuff into the body, right?
Yeah.
So if your gut has holes basically punched into it by the zonulin, then you're getting the bad proteins into the body, and then your body reacts. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay.
Whatever those toxins are. So it could be, toxins from the foods you eat, because that's one of our main elimination systems, one of our main detoxification systems, right? So whether or not they're getting filtered out by the liver, by the kidneys, or whether they're just going out through our feces, what have you, if any of those toxins are getting leaked out, that could be a problem. It could be something as simple as a food sensitivity. So that may just be inflammation that's being caused, maybe not necessarily, a toxin, but causing that inflammation, which is systemic in a lot of disease. And so that's where we can have some of those issues come up from leaky gut as well, just simply from that inflammation.
Okay. So this is really great. So how do you go about healing leaky gut?
Absolutely. So we look at healing the gut in general. We want to make sure to take out anything that is going to be triggering that condition. So if it's something like autoimmunity, we would maybe be following some sort of autoimmune protocol, whether it's autoimmune paleo, whether it's a Walls protocol, whether it's something along those lines where we're taking out things that we know potentially trigger autoimmune conditions. So whether it's grains, whether it's dairy, whether it's eggs, whether it's nightshades, taking into account all of these things that we know can trigger that autoimmunity and allow the gut to heal, because we're not sending it those signals to cause that inflammation anymore. We're not giving it the things that we know are going to irritate and damage the gut lining. So we're taking out the things that are damaging it.
Okay.
And then we're going to add in things that we know can heal it. So whether it's, whether it's supplements, something like L-glutamine that we can help to tighten those loose junctions again, or adding in some of those supplements that are anti-inflammatory. Some of these things where we can make sure to have foods that are going to help with that anti-inflammatory process as well. Yes, so a lot of healing foods would be things basically, for most people with autoimmunity, is going to be something like paleo long-term. Unless we have certain genetic things that come into play. In general, we're going to have something like paleo long-term. An autoimmune paleo protocol would be something that we would do short-term. And then that would be the more long-term health protocol. And I think that's one of the main things I like to make sure to point out for people, is that when you have an autoimmune condition, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to cut out all those foods forever, because there are some things, like you were talking about earlier with tomatoes. We were discussing all the health benefits of tomatoes, and it's not like those things are bad. It's not like tomatoes are bad. There's a lot of health benefits to them. In the short term, maybe cutting some of those things out to take out anything that could be a potential issue, and then slowly adding those back in once we've had a chance to add some of the good things in, we've taken out the bad, and we can slowly add some of those things back in so that they don't react negatively in the system anymore.
Right. What about like bone broths and fermented foods and things like that? Will they help?
Absolutely. Bone broth is really nourishing. It's really nutrient dense. Nutrient density is going to be one of the biggest key factors here. I mean, with any diet, we want to make sure that we're focusing on nutrient density, but especially when you have this, your gut is where you digest all your food and where you take in all your nutrients. So if we've had damage to the gut lining, then we're not absorbing enough nutrients from our food. So making sure that we're having a really nutrient dense diet so that your body has everything that it needs to heal itself is critical. So nutrient density is going to be a big part. So having something like the bone broth that's going to be really easy and nutrient dense and is really easily digestible and absorbed is really great. Unless you have some type of histamine condition, which we may not have to worry about, bone broth's a really great option. And then the second thing you asked about was probiotic foods, right? Fermented foods.
Yeah, I'm just really curious about that.
I just wanted to make sure I remembered correctly. So basically your gut is also home to a lot of beneficial bacteria, and whether or not that beneficial bacteria should be much higher in level than your potentially pathogenic bacteria. And so we want to make sure that there's a good balance there, because having enough of the good bacteria is going to keep the bad bacteria down, and that in itself is going to help with digestion. And so we want to make sure it's also going to help with a lot of mental conditions, but we can save that for a separate talk because I can talk about that all day long. So making sure that, yes, a lot of those fermented foods and really high beneficial bacteria containing products, so things like probiotics and fermented yogurts or things like that, if you can handle it, are really beneficial.
Very, very cool. And I feel like we skipped a few steps in here because I think we should just talk a little bit about the difference between paleo and what paleo is versus the autoimmune paleo protocol, and what is some of the things that AIP does not include that paleo does. So basically the paleo diet is going to be something where we have a majority of our intake should be on nutrient dense foods, so things like vegetables, things like fruits. It's going to have a lot of proteins, a lot of animal protein sources in it. The difference with fats,
and healthy fats are very important too. Now, what we don't want to have in a paleo diet are things like a lot of refined sugars, any processed chemicals, any unhealthy fats, so things like canola oils and a lot of the vegetable oils, processed oils, things like that.
No margarines.
Yeah, exactly. And then we also want to be focusing on making sure grains are going to be eliminated, dairy is going to be eliminated, legumes, so things like beans are going to be eliminated from that diet. Whereas the autoimmune protocol then takes that an extra step. A lot of people eat a lot of eggs on a paleo diet, whereas autoimmune protocol, we're not going to have any eggs. So a lot of the breakfast foods are going to be mainly animal protein based, things like sausages and things of that nature. So then on top of that, we won't have nightshades. Nightshades are allowed in the paleo diet. So nightshades would be things like bell peppers and eggplant and tomatoes. Those are pretty common ones. But those would not be allowed in an AIP diet.
Is potato a nightshade?
That's a good question. Sweet potato is not a nightshade.
Yeah.
White potato is a nightshade.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes. And by the way, as we're talking on these little subjects, ashwagandha is an herb that a lot of people take for stress. Ashwagandha is actually a nightshade. So a lot of people I've found that are on these autoimmune protocols that have all these stress issues and are trying to get their stress management up are taking ashwagandha, which is actually nightshade. So if you're following the AIP protocol by that guideline, it's actually not compliant. So that's something I like to throw in there every time I do one of these talks, because usually at least one person who's watching is taking ashwagandha when they're on the AIP. So
interesting. I did not know that. Okay, but so your whole thing is go AIP, which is very restrictive. There's no way to beat around the bush. It can be a little bit difficult to cook AIP and all that. But when you heal your gut, can you scale back to just standard paleo?
Yes. So I like to make sure that everybody understands that when I put them on this protocol, it's short term. So we like to give the gut a chance to heal. We like to give the body a chance to heal, whether it's getting the autoimmunity down in the brain versus the thyroid versus the other organs in your body, whatever we have that's going on. I feel like autoimmune issues in the gut and the thyroid are two of the main ones I see most commonly in my practice, but there's also obviously a lot of different autoimmune conditions of the skin or what have you. So making sure that we're giving the body a chance to heal before we start adding those things in is really important. But for some people, that can be a month. That's all it takes. For some people, it may take more like a year. That kind of depends on the person and how long they've been chronically dealing with this issue and how much time it takes their gut to repair. But if it's something that they've caught early on, it might not be something that we have to be on very restrictive for very long at all. And then afterwards, we can start to implement some of those foods back into the diet.
Very, very cool. So I'm just really curious, how do you work with people in your practice? Let's say somebody comes to your office, says, hey, I have an MS, can you help me?
Absolutely.
How does it work?
Absolutely. So I have people come in, and what I do is I spend the first hour just getting a full health history. I start from your birth. I start from the conditions surrounding your birth, all the way up through all the vaccines, all of the major life events, all of the things that have happened up through your current day concerns, because all of those things interact with, again, your genes and your environment to affect your health. So we start from day one, sometimes a little bit before day one, and go all the way up through your current day's health concerns. And so after we get your full health history, we look at, ideally I like to do testing. Testing is not required, but say somebody comes in and doesn't have a diagnosis. I have a lot of clients that come in, they're like, I have just been dealing with chronic GI issues my entire life. I'm nauseous, I've had constipation, diarrhea, what have you, for years. And I've been to GI specialists and I'm not getting any answers. Medications are helping. What do I do?
Yeah.
We do some testing, and I have 99% of the time it's some type of autoimmune GI concern, or there's some other GI issues going on that we get addressed, and you actually fix the root cause. Is it mold in the house? Is it heavy metals? Is it just diet and inflammation that's happening? Is it something else that we can address naturally to actually address the root cause of the problem and not just address the symptoms? And that's when we start to get actual healing of the body happening. And people within a couple weeks are coming back to me saying, oh my gosh, I haven't thrown up in weeks, where I've been throwing up at least a couple times a week for years, So having people have that much of a turnaround in such a short amount of time is really rewarding.
It's I gotta say, it's miraculous sometimes.
Yeah.
And I have a story. A long time ago, before I opened this restaurant, I was blogging about paleo, and I didn't know much about autoimmune at the time because I didn't start learning about it because I don't have one. I was learning about it through our customers that come here, and through their requests, we started integrating some of the autoimmune protocol things, right? But this woman, she found me somewhere online, and she started following paleo. Now, this woman has had 34 abdominal surgeries. A lot of her got taken out. She had Crohn's, and the doctors told her, I think this was like April, May, something, she wouldn't live past December. And she just didn't know, nothing. So many drugs, all of it. 2 days after going paleo, she emails me and said, hey, this is the first day I got out of bed without any painkillers. I could move around. It was it just... Sometimes nutrition can really save your life. When
it's the building block of your body. I mean, if you think about it, all of the chemical processes that need to happen in your body need nutrients as a precursor, whether it's a certain vitamin, whether it's a certain mineral in a certain form.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that we have those things, or else the body can't do what it's naturally meant to do.
Yeah.
It's not meant to have all these deficiencies, and whether those deficiencies happen because we have inflammation and damage in the gut to start, or whether they happen because we're just not getting enough in the diet, fixing where the problem is coming from, a majority of the time fixes the issue without having to take a medication. And there's a time and place for that. I mean, there's a lot of conditions where we need to have a natural approach with a medical approach combined until we get to the point where we can start doing things naturally or what have you. A lot of people need some of those steroids, and so I'm not knocking people who have needed to do that because they didn't realize that that was their condition until years passed, you know? So there's a time and place for everything, but making sure that long term we know, we educate. I feel like that's a big piece of my job, is just educating people of how their body really works and why we need these things, because when you understand why certain foods are detrimental or healing to your body, you're much more likely to stick to that protocol than if you just are told, I have to take this supplement or I have to follow this protocol. Well, okay, well, I really want that cake, you know? How do you have your cake and eat it too? How do you make those things that you love? How do you have your comfort foods and still have them be healing for you? What recipes can we give you to make sure that you're still getting the nutrient density that you need while still enjoying your life? And so that's, I feel like, a big part of what I do.
That's amazing. Okay, so for anybody who wants to work with Sasha, you guys, because she's awesome and she will help you with autoimmune, where's your office located and how do they get in touch with you?
My office is located in North Boulder, off of Yarmouth and 14th Street. We also have a second location in Lafayette that just opened off of 95th and Arapahoe. Yeah. So we have 2 separate locations. And
do people get to see you in person in both of those? Okay, wow.
Yep, great. And every appointment is going to be with me. And so you can contact me by email at drsasha@flatironsIntegrative.com, or you can call me on my direct office line, is 720-310-5373.
Yeah, we're going to make sure to post, when we post this video recording, if you could post it on the video so people can contact you.
Sure.
Very, very cool. Is there anything that we haven't talked about? Any interesting stories from the people we have seen over the years that you wanted to share, maybe?
I could talk about that for hours. I think the main, going back to ways to contact me, my website is www.flatironsIntegrative.com. And so if people want to look at my website and see what some of my other specialties are, or things that may be connected to autoimmune conditions, that's all on my website. There's a really good educational piece on there. If people just want to learn more about certain conditions, that's all on my website as well.
I do have one more. Oh, so sorry. I do have one more question. So last week we did a Facebook Live with Mary Kay Irving, who's absolutely amazing, about keto.
Yes.
So I was just curious, how does that tie into autoimmune? Do you recommend keto for people with autoimmune disease?
I feel like I've gotten better response in general just from an AIP protocol or doing something like walls, like we were talking about before. There are certain conditions where I feel like if it's more neurologically based, like epilepsy or something like that, where a ketogenic diet, me personally, I found being more effective versus some of these other protocols. The one thing that you need to keep into mind with an autoimmune protocol or even something like paleo is I always recommend some sort of genetic testing and some sort of cardiovascular testing to make sure your body processes fats the correct way. And if we have any issues where we're having issues processing fats, we figure out what those are. Are we going to have any cardiovascular risks from this in the long run? And if we don't, then it's going to be really therapeutic for you. And I don't see that very often, but every once in a while we have to take those things into consideration.
I've seen it at the restaurant. We've had a couple customers who cannot have any fat, and I'm like, how? That's the most difficult thing I could imagine.
Certain fats we have to be concerned about, so making sure the proper forms of fats for that individual are appropriate. And you know, not that we shouldn't have any fats, because fats are going to be really important for body function.
So good for you.
Right? But making sure that for that individual we're having the right sort of fats recommended is really important.
Right. So generally lots of avocado and coconut and animal fats and
in general those are really healing. Every once in a while we have somebody with, you know, an APOE gene where we have to be a little bit concerned about that and focus more on the olive oils, and even though they're a little bit less they have lower heating points where we maybe just wouldn't want to use that as much as in high heat cooking, which we could talk about on another day.
We could talk about fats for like 2 hours.
Yep.
And omega-3s and 6s and monosaturated, unsaturated.
If anybody wants to have another Facebook Live about that, just let us know and we can know what.
Maybe we'll do it like a month from now. We'll just talk about fats. Yeah, fats are cool. Fats are really interesting. Well,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's all my questions I have.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for having me here. I'm
Yeah.
glad I got to chat with you.
Thank you so much for being here. And hi, Mike Lynch. And hi, Judith. Good to see you guys. Hi, Mary Kay. I didn't even say hi to all those folks. I think we saw Adam Hip too. Hi, Adam. So, you guys are in the same group, right?
Yep.
And Adam,
Mm-hmm.
hi. So, all familiar people. All right, guys. We'll see you next time, next Monday. I forget what we're talking about. I think we're talking about microbiome.
That's a good topic.
Yeah, and actually, I think so. I'm trying to. So this woman, she's a manager at Fresh Times, and she's amazing. And so she knows a lot about this stuff. So I invited her to join Blooming Beats Fresh Times. Think about microbiomes. That could be really interesting. So I hope that works out. And then we could talk about. At some point, we could talk about fats too.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That would be great.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Thank you for watching. Bye.